and believe I have followed my passion and synchronicity. Why am I discovering Bashar only now? What is my higher mind trying to tell me? What's next?
You are discovering this information now because now is the timing for it. Now is when you're ready for it. Now you can implement it, especially if you are retiring. Now you are free to implement whatever you wish that is representative of your passion, even more so. And therefore, there may be value in some of the information we are sharing with you to allow you the opportunity to do this now that you have timed the finding of this information with the idea of freeing up your time schedule.
Great. Is it possible for a human that has only ever known conditional love to experience and express and feel unconditional love for another or for themselves?
Of course it is. Again, the idea is you go through a process of removing the conditions on that love. It doesn't mean that you suddenly accept things that are not vibrationally compatible for yourself. It doesn't mean that you condone those things that you know you don't prefer. It simply means you have more compassion and understanding that someone is going through a process on their own path, just like you would for a child who hasn't learned everything yet. And therefore, you have compassion and love for them to see that they are on a path of learning, on a path that they have chosen to develop themselves, expand themselves, learn their lessons. And therefore, you can love them and support them in the doing of that thing without necessarily condoning the negative belief systems or fear-based actions that they may take on their journey. You can help them understand how to make better choices, more positive choices.
And the next question is, I've heard you say that negative beliefs will do everything in their power, including hiding themselves.
Yes.
Will you please say more about this?
Well, again, you have to understand that negative beliefs will use denial to make it seem as if there's nothing to look for. So they use denial because a person that is in denial is also in denial that they're in denial. And therefore, it forms kind of a double protective layer for the negative belief that you don't even think there's anything to go looking for. You don't even start exploring. So that's how it uses the idea of denial to hide itself by creating this sort of double barrier, this double shell. Because someone can recognize they may be in denial of something and refuse to face it, but then the negative belief can also make it seem as if there's nothing to look for, that they're in denial of being in denial. So it can be a very powerful filter to break through. But again, if you understand that this is how beliefs, and especially negative beliefs, work, then you can always go exploring to see if you are in fact in denial about being in denial about something.
And the next question is, if you've survived years of sexual abuse at a young age and want to help others heal, but the perpetrator denies everything, how can you be of service when you cannot openly share your own experience?
You can openly share your own experience. You don't necessarily have to name the perpetrator. You can simply use what was done as a general example in order to illustrate the points that you are making to help others. So you can use it as general examples of your experience without necessarily pointing a finger at a specific person who may be in denial of their actions.
And next question. How do I live a life where I am aware of the negative but only experience the positive? How does that work exactly? And what will it look like?
Again, you can be aware that there will always be an opportunity to choose the negative, but you have to get to a point where you realize it makes no sense to do so. You have to understand very deeply and very clearly and very precisely how things work, how you create your reality, and why you would ever create a reason to choose the negative idea, the fear-based idea. And again, remembering the formula and the fourth step of remaining in a positive state no matter what happens is what will allow you to transform any experience, even ones you don't prefer, ones that are out of alignment with who you choose to be, it'll allow you to transform them and get a benefit from them no matter what they are. So the idea is to, again, to understand how this all works and to use it precisely. And then you can recognize there will always be the opportunity to choose something negative, but it will simply no longer make any sense for you to do so. You will never react even to something that you don't prefer in a negative way. Remember, it's not about what happens, it's about what you do with what happens that makes the difference. So no one is saying that something may not manifest ever again that you don't prefer. That's not what we're saying. It doesn't mean those things can't manifest. It simply means, what are you going to do if it does? Are you going to stay in a positive state so you can get a benefit from it? Or are you going to react negatively to it as if something is wrong just because it manifested? You're always given an opportunity to learn a lesson from something. So don't go by what it is, go by what you do with what it is.
Perfect, because that just answered the next question. So I will move on.
All right.
Um, Discernment, how can we best differentiate which information is coming from our physical mind and which is coming from our higher mind? It's not always clear.
Well, it depends on what kind of information you're talking about. You know, when you're honest with yourself, the difference between excitement and anxiety, whether it comes from your physical mind or your higher mind. So again, you just have to be discerning about, does the information, no matter where it's coming from, actually benefit you in some way, shape, or form? Or does it seek to limit and control you in a negative way? It doesn't matter where it comes from. Your own physical mind is capable of giving you information that's beneficial for you. You don't have to assume that the physical mind will always be trying to knock you down. So it doesn't really matter where it comes from, as long as you believe that the information, regardless of its source, is beneficial for your growth and learning lessons so you can advance and expand and move on.
And the next question is, do ETs possess universal communicators to interact with humans who speak different languages? In most ET encounters reported, the beings appear to speak the native language without the assistance of an electronic device. So what methods are they using to translate human language, or do most ET beings learn human languages at some points?
It's all of the above. There are cultures that have technology that allow them to have universal translators. A lot of ETs simply communicate telepathically and therefore need no device at all. And some ETs actually do learn human languages. So it just depends on the extraterrestrial and what they prefer to do or what they have access to. It can be any or all of the above, depending upon the species.
Pretty exciting.
All right, if you say so.
um, do spirits ever try to do things and get attention of the living through things like starting, this person is saying, for example, could my dead mother, arrange to have a song start playing on the radio when I walk into a store?
Absolutely. Spirits will do things like this all the time to get the attention of the living. As we have often said, they will use what's already in your reality synchronistically in order to deliver messages most of the time, because that's the easiest way to do it, because the information is already in your reality. And it doesn't take much to cause a certain thing to happen, especially with electronics, that can then get your attention and make you think of them to put you in touch with the fact that they may be sending you a message. So yes, spirit guides will do this quite often.
So the idea that some people may suffer from something like schizophrenia, where they are watching television and suddenly they believe the television is talking specifically to them, versus an individual who consciously makes the decision to shift into a different state where they can receive the information that's coming through the television, so to speak, in a personal way.
Yes,
And
one can be in out of balanced mental state The other can be a balanced mental state.
So if you find something like that happening where you're getting communication through something like television or radio, the idea is to remain in a positive state and recognize that it may be a momentary communication per se, but
Yes.
not in a way that is unhealthy in that sense.
Yes, of course. It usually won't be that someone thinks that the television character is actually speaking to them directly, as if they were an autonomous being. It will be more like the person recognizes that something in what is being transmitted has personal meaning for them, and that the timing of the delivery of that has something to do beyond the idea of what's actually playing on the television. The characters on the television don't become the primary style of communication. It's simply something that is used from a being that is not necessarily displayed on the television.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yes.
Now, as open contact progresses and humanity evolves, will we someday be able to connect with people in spirit as easily as it is for us to call someone who's still alive on the telephone?
Yes. We do it all the time in my society.
Can we have Zoom calls with the deceased?
Well, you don't need the Zoom to do it. Eventually, you'll be able to simply perceive them and communicate with them, again, on a telepathic level.
And what's the time frame for that to happen?
Depends on the individual. Obviously, there are individuals who can do that now. You usually refer to them as sensitive or psychics. But for the majority of your society to have this ability, probably within the next 100 of your years.
Very interesting. And when we leave physical Earth, do we retain only our level of consciousness after death? What happens to the mind? No book or source seems to explain what occurs with the mind after death.
Well, the physical mind is the product of belief systems that are no longer relevant when you're a spirit, but you retain the experience that the physical mind had in much the same way that you retain memories of childhood, even though you're no longer a child. So the idea is the experience you had as a physical being with a physical mind is always retained as a part of you. It will always be a part of you when you go back into spirit, because you need to learn from it. You need to add it to the overall information that helps you make decisions as to what to do next. So you will never lose the experience or the memories of the experience, so to speak, but you will not necessarily have a physical mind in the same way that is determined by the belief systems that create the physical mind. You will be above and beyond that. You will have your own identity. You will recognize yourself, but in a different way.
And is it possible to keep shifting into realities where a loved one is alive, even though they're dead in other realities?
It's a rare thing and usually not necessary, because there are lessons to be had, especially in this day and age, about someone no longer physically being in your reality. I wouldn't say it's an impossibility, but it's an improbability for most people, because it's simply not the way most life paths are designed on your planet at this time.
And how do you distinguish between advanced virtual reality simulations and tapping directly into parallel realities? Does your civilization engage with virtual realities?
Well, yes, but at a certain point, there's absolutely no distinction or difference between what you may perceive as a virtual reality and a parallel reality, since the simulation idea, the holographic idea, is a projection of consciousness anyway from all of you. You're creating your own virtual reality every day. So ultimately, you get to a point where there really isn't much difference between the idea of a parallel reality and a virtual reality.
Okay, and this person is asking, they say they were on the timeline for the female to win the election, but and they had turned into joy and creativity. what happened? Now they're affected by a new administration in the timeline. And why is that? It feels like there is no glass wall between the person and the reality they're now experiencing, even though they don't prefer it.
Drop your expectations and insistences. This goes back to the first conversation we had about keeping in the state of being of what you prefer in the midst of perceiving the chaos, so you can be of assistance by maintaining the preferred vibration while the chaos is going along, because that's what's going to allow the momentum to ultimately bring the chaos back down to center. So it's not about being in the wrong reality. It's about staying in the preferred state that represents the outcome you would have preferred, and staying in that state will help with the idea ultimately of getting people to the point where they will ultimately tire of all the chaos, and then you can be of some assistance in helping bring that energy back toward the center instead of going to the other extreme.
And since the one is the all and the all are the one, does that mean that each one of us is exploring everything infinitely? We just are not aware of doing that as individuals.
Well, yes, of course, there are many different levels and aspects to your consciousness that are exploring everything simultaneously. But this idea, this level you call physical reality, and this individual personality, by definition, is exploring a particular life path that prevents you from experiencing a lot of the other things that the larger versions of you, so to speak, are also doing, because it's not relevant for the life path you wish to experience as a physical individual in this reality.
Gamma state. And I'd like to do that sort of all the time because I'd like to achieve that state. However, I'm curious if it's a crutch, permission slip, right? Because I assume that you use technology like your ship, right? And that's not a permission slip. So can you please help me determine whether or not I'm using it as a crutch? Am I doing damage by maintaining a specific level when perhaps I would be rising above it if I didn't have this one specific frequency? It's 45, by the way. So anyway, any advice you could give me on that would help. Thank you.
Since you are concerned that you might be using it as a crutch, then I would pay attention to your behavior, because the idea is that you're using that to train yourself to do it without the app. So the idea is that you also will be fluctuating in and out of that vibration so that you can come into a vibration where you can apply what you're learning by being in the channeling state, but you may have to be in a different vibration in order to apply it, until such time as you allow yourself to operate on a frequency where it is automatic that you will remain in that high state. So you can use the app as a training mechanism to allow you to become more comfortable and familiar with remaining in that state on your own without the app. If you constantly feel that you cannot do that without the app, then yes, it can become a crutch. And it won't allow you to necessarily go into any other state that you need to go into to apply what you've learned in that state into your physical reality, because you cannot always maintain that state when applying lessons in your physical reality necessarily. Eventually, you will have different lessons that will be more representative of staying in that state. But for the lessons that you may need to learn now, you may have to leave that state in order to apply them in your physical reality and go through a process that will give you the information and experience that you need that will ultimately, paradoxically, bring you back to the gamma state. But don't insist on staying there until it is something that you can do naturally and come from that state all the time in a natural way without needing any kind of technological assistance. Our ships, yes, are not exactly permission slips. They are, to coin a phrase, permission ships. They are representative of manifestation of our own higher mind, to which we are inexorably linked and therefore telepathically in touch with all the time. But that's our reality. It's where we've evolved to. Humanity is not there yet, but you are practicing the things that can bring you there at some point. So again, in your recognition that it could become a crutch, you are being aware of the possibility that you may not necessarily always use it in a positive way. So allow yourself to go with the flow that synchronicity will bring about to show you when it is appropriate to use it, and when you can allow yourself to receive the training that the app gives you to learn how to become that state on its own in a natural way, which again, in a sense, is why we delivered the formula to you. If you want to look at the formula as a kind of app, you can. But it's an app that allows you to function in a more natural way and a more organic way, in a more synchronistic and fluid way than the idea of the apps that you might be creating with your technology. Not that you can't use them, not that they're invalid, but the formula, in a sense, is the ultimate organic app for what you seek.
Hi, Bashar. It's really exciting to communicate with you in this way.
Good day, good day. It is exciting for us as well.
So my first question is about astral activities and what people are doing together in preparation for contact on the higher levels. I had a really, really lucid dream where I was going into some sort of courtyard and I was with lots of people from all walks of life, such as doctors, some politicians, some religious people, farmers even, literally every walk of life. And I remember sort of standing next to somebody and asking and saying to them, wow, with these sorts of people here, we're really going to make some progress moving forward towards contact. I was just wondering if you could share your reflection on that experience and kind of
Yes.
where we are at the moment.
All right. Understand, of course, as we have said, in spirit, before you incarnate, you plan out, generally speaking, and sometimes very specifically, your physical life path. But your physical life path is intertwined with all other life paths. So in astral form, many times you will reconnect with all of the others who you have agreed to intertwine with in their life paths with yours, and you will assess what is going on. You will allow yourself to congregate in a way so that you can allow yourselves to adjust your energies and frequencies to make sure that the life path blueprints you have all agreed shall unfold in physical reality, are still moving forward in that way. Agree to make whatever adjustments energetically or physiologically are necessary in your blueprint for the things to unfold as you have all concurred and agreed that they shall. So many times in astral form, you will have these so-called conclaves to make sure you are all still moving forward together, that everything is coherent and cohesive, and it will unfold in physical reality and manifest in physical reality as you all intended. That is what is going on in that case.
Thank you so much for that clarification.
Yes.
My next question is about step 2 of the social experiment. One of the aspects talked about is meditation. So I've been sort of really enjoying getting into sort of doing about an hour or 45 minutes a day of meditation, sometimes more. And what I've started to discover is an energy that comes down through either my crown or the pituitary gland, and it's almost like a quasi-physical energy, it feels like, and it kind of filters down into my head and makes me feel very deeply relaxed, and also seems to emphasize my psychic abilities and things I can pick up and visions and that kind of thing.
Yes.
When we with this sort of experience, sometimes I can get, it almost feels like a hole is opening up in the center of my head, and my consciousness is kind of getting pulled sometimes towards other consciousness. Could you just help me understand what's happening?
All right. Again, remember, your physical self exists at the center of your soul. It's like you are an energy sphere, that is your soul, and you have certain vibrational patterns that condense in the center of the soul to create this little crystalline solidified version of those energy patterns that you represent as the physical personality. So when you do things that allow you to be back in touch with the vibration of your greater self, your higher mind, your soul, spirit, same thing, you feel it as an energy coming down into you because that's how you relate to the idea of physical reality, as above, so below. But what's really happening is you are expanding and softening the idea of that concentration of yourself as a physical personality and starting to soften and expand back toward the idea of the soul. And so it does feel like the opening of a hole because you are expanding, you're opening up, you're allowing more of your soul to express itself through the physical personality, through the physical form. That's what you're experiencing, is the expansion of your bandwidth, the expansion of your energy, expressing more of who you are as a soul so that you can use and apply it in your physical reality in more effective and synchronistic ways.
So when we move forward and our vibration increases, and let's say hypothetically we're at a time in the future where we're having the beginnings of contact, will that sort of state of being and those sorts of feelings be much more sort of stable and in place during each of our days, kind of thing? Something
Yes.
we'd be used to?
Yes, you'll get used to it.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for clarifying everything today.
It is our passion and our pleasure. We thank you for the co-creation. Aveo. Good day.
Too.
Hello, Bashar. I've got a quick question. I do have a real reality in my physical life, and I do have a parallel reality in my mind, which also exists from time to time with another person, let's say. So my question is, how can I change my realities, my delusional reality? How can I bring it, and can I bring it into my real reality to substitute one into another one? Is that possible? Thank you.
You may be picking up on the idea of something on your life path that will manifest at some point in the future. But again, the idea is you will not manifest anything from a parallel reality that isn't relevant for the life path that you chose. It might be symbolic of your ability to be more of yourself, as opposed to actually attracting a manifestation of a parallel reality. It might be simply something you're using to inspire you to do so. But again, if it is part of your life path that you planned out as a soul, then ultimately you may be using the idea of tapping into a parallel reality to strengthen and reinforce your capability to manifest what you have already planned out as a blueprint for your life path here, to become your version of what that person in that parallel reality represents to you energetically.